Welcome back, everybody, to the Quantum Health Connection podcast. My name is Heather Crimson, and I'm here with my lovely and brilliant co-host, Vanessa Baldwin. And today we have a very special guest who hails from the UK, but currently hanging out in Tulum, Mexico. So fabulous. And Sean Waters, he is a health coach who teaches people to heal from chronic disease using his method called the body clock. And he used this to personally cure his own autoimmune diseases in 2016. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Thank you very much for that introduction.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on and connecting with us. We're really excited for this conversation, this chat. I mean, we always want to start with somebody's health history, right? Or health journey or story, right? So tell us, like, how did you discover the body clock method and how did that use that to heal yourself? I think of IBD, right?
Yes, yeah. So it took quite a few years for me to figure out that it was IBD. I think when I was young, I had a lot of eczema and I was really naughty as well as a kid, like just
What does that mean,
running
naughty?
around my mum hell. Well, not like that naughty, but
Oh.
very just like yeah, rebellious, hyperactive, which was kind of all part of the sort of you know understanding that as I got older, kind of what was going on. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, it was basically autoimmunity, and yeah, I was quite unwell since I was a baby, um, and kind of getting repeated bouts of like tonsillitis, they called it, which again I don't really think it was that. It was just kind of like upper esophageal inflammation, kind of episodes of that, which is sort of like a precursor to the IBD and everything. Just really junk food, junk light, a lot of EMF. Um, I think I had got vaccines too, just like all the stuff we
Yeah,
know about and that we shouldn't be giving to kids. I got like a really good dose of it. We did a good job on me basically. And
me too. It's
but
okay.
when I was 16, I started getting really more severe symptoms in my gut. And I could sort of see a separation between me and my friends and my brother, and my family, like, oh, there's something really different about this. And I started to sort of develop depression and things
Mhm.
started getting dark. And there was about 4 or 5 years like that until I was 21. And I eventually got diagnosed after a really painful bout of like a Crohn's flare up. I didn't know at the time it was Crohn's. So I went into the hospital. It's actually Valentine's Day. It's 10 years ago in 3 days that I
Oh,
Oh,
went into hospital.
wow.
Yeah, it's a decade on, yeah, I guess it would be, yeah, Friday. Friday I started my love affair with all this stuff. So yeah, I was in severe pain. I couldn't even kind of lift my arm because to reach my phone to call anyone, I was in bed. It was just like being like stabbed. It was immense. I kind of thought maybe I'm going to die, but I woke up in the morning, managed to call my grandma because all my parents and my girlfriend at the time were all out. They were sort of on holidays and stuff. So I was on my own at home. My grandma came and picked me up. She didn't know what was going on. Took me to the hospital and it settled. And so they were like, we're going to do laparoscopy, which is like a camera where they put cameras inside to see what's going on. We think you have appendicitis and your appendix might have burst, but we're just monitoring you. Everything was fine. My brother and his wife showed up, and then the bout started again. So I then was in the ward, like just screaming. My brother was like in bed, and I mean, I was cursing the whole ward down like the everybody in the ward was like looking at me like, what's happening? So they put me on morphine.
oh, wow.
I went into surgery for the night. Um, and I woke up the next day thinking my appendix had been removed and like
Mhm.
we're good. Listo, as they say it in Mexico. But no, actually you have Crohn's disease. And this is why you've been coming in asking the doctors for the last 5 years what's going on with your gut. Like this is the history, it makes sense. So that was obviously quite devastating for my family, for my mom, for everybody. Like, oh, he's got this incurable disease. Like, he's done now. Like, kind of
That's
that's
it.
kind of what it is. You get that. He's 21, but for me, it vindicated 5 years of feeling really depressed and feeling like something was wrong with me, but getting told you're fine.
Yeah.
Because I spent a lot of those 5 years in more of a sort of existential, psychological circle of questioning my own sanity.
Yep.
So to get someone to tell you it's something physical was like, oh, so my mental state is being caused by this. It's
Yep.
not that I am inherently like, faulty in my mind.
Yeah, I
Because
can
the
so relate to
backstory
that,
is,
Sean, because
go ahead.
I was diagnosed with interstitial cystitis, and it's a chronic pain in the bladder, and my mental state really deteriorated from that, and I can really relate to that, like not knowing what it is or how it was. I very much can relate. Like you're like, oh, when you get the diagnosis, you're like, oh, that makes sense. That's why I'm like this, right? Like not that that's the reason, but it correlated, right? That was the reason. So I can relate.
Yes. Yeah, it's tough when you don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of
and
scary.
the world, our society, is just as confused.
Mhm.
So, you go to authority figures, whether it be a doctor, whether it be your parents, whether it be your family, and there's no one knows what's going on. No
Yep.
one really has any idea. So you just end up in a mess. And actually, a lot of the labels, psychology in general, I think is one of the most dangerous fields that
Mhm.
exists. I think it's actually damaging us more than anything. It's phenomenal, actually. The more I look into it, the more I'm just like, my God. Because you compare it with how the East deals with the mind and deals with psychology, and it's a totally different thing. We've like studied ill people and we've based our understanding of psychology off that. Whereas in the East, they've studied enlightened people who are free, and that's how you
That's
should
so
be,
true.
right?
And
So it's
we
like,
also we also don't connect the physical, the mental, and emotional over here either. Like we're kind of like, oh, it's this separate, everything's separate. We're this closed system, but really we're this open system where everything is connected. But we kind
yes,
of like decompartmentalize everything, right? And go to all these different specialists when really we're one person, right?
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yeah, and the background as well to it was that is my dad, which kind of I had to figure this out as well by looking into sort of my SNPs and my genetics and stuff a little bit later on. That was kind of the recent years. But my dad actually kind of went through a bipolar manic episode when I was like 6 months old, something like that, 1 year old, and never was the same since. I mean, this guy was, he owned multiple houses. He was just like, one of the lads. He was, a good guy. People knew him. My mom loved him. Um, but yeah, he went through this really sharp turn, and that was just when I was sort of conceived. And he was on a lot of strong medication, and he's kind of never bounced back from that. I mean, he's just kind of become well, he's diagnosed with like cannabis psychosis
Mm.
and it's like bipolar, manic
Mm.
depression, I guess. Multiple labels for what he is. Again, does it really describe what is happening to him? I don't know. But that was always sort of in the background because it was such a trauma on the family that, you know, when I was going through that period of, when I was 16 to 21, it was like, oh, it's happening again. So
Wow.
it was almost kind of like, he's kind of going to end up like his dad, especially because I was
Yeah.
used to support myself. I was using marijuana, I was using alcohol, I was, to try and feel some sense of comfort from what I was experiencing mentally and physically. Um, and Birmingham, just like the cities in the UK, are full of these recreational uh, drugs, and everyone's doing it. Everyone's doing cocaine, marijuana, drinking. I mean, that's what you do. It's like if you don't do it, you're weird. because that's what everybody does.
Right, right.
So
Right. It's kind of weird.
yeah,
You're the weirdo if you're taking care of your health, I find now, right? You are literally the
yeah.
weirdo, right? But I'd rather be weird any day.
Well, now it's better. Like now it's a lot better. I mean, the one good thing about Instagram is kind of, you've got like Carnivore Aurelius just making these hilarious videos about like mooing at cows and mooing at people and being like a carnivore and sunning, your perineum and being kind of whatever. As at least we have that now. COVID almost gave us the sort of contrast and made everyone kind of wake up. So at least there's some fashion to it now. But you know, back in 2009, 10, when this was happening, no, like this was the first wave of culture. There was none of it. I mean, what was it was even Jack? I don't even think Dr. Cruz was even writing stuff in 2009, 2010.
I
I
think
think he
I came
wasn't.
across the
Like,
quilt. He had about a third of it done in about 2011, 12. I was in
right.
such
So
a deep chronic fatigue state, though, Sean, that I couldn't hang with it and I stopped following him. And it wasn't until 2018 that I was working with some of his proteges and they used this neurosurgery without a scalpel or something. And I Googled that phrase and I'm like, oh, it's Jack again. That guy.
yeah,
Okay. And by
that
then
guy.
I was healed enough, a little bit more healed to be able to start to understand some of what he was talking about.
Right. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I think it's easier now. Um, but yeah, back then it was definitely not understood. And Birmingham is just like a very closed community. It's
Mhm.
all Irish immigrants that moved from Ireland to work in the factories, and so it's just like you just drink, and there's a lot of kind of social, not so much pressure, but reinforcement of your psychology and your idea of who you are. A lot of social reinforcement. To break out of that is extremely difficult. I mean, no one's holding a gun to your head, but it's like you
Mhm.
really identify with that you are from that place and this crowd. Um, so yeah, anyway, I kind of got very lucky. Grace of God, really. I mean, I think this whole process has just been the grace of God, to be honest. It's kind of how I see it now.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, basically, that was Valentine's 2015, and I've just kind of been. I've always been into boxing and MMA. It's one good thing about Birmingham is we like fighting, and so that brought me to Joe Rogan, and and um, listening to him, he had a guest on called Dr. Rhonda Patrick, and she started. I mean, I just put it on one day, and I was like, "Who is this?
Mm.
Like, how does she know these things? Like she's talking about omega-3. Can control this, that, and the other in the genes, and it does the. And I'm like, I'm just like this regular guy in Birmingham, like, what? Like this, and it starts to become possible that there might be something there, you know. So I just followed it. I just followed her, and I listened to all the podcasts and I listened to them again. And then I
Mm.
went to like this store in my city and I bought some omega-3 and I bought some vitamin D and I bought some curcumin and some fiber and some. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I played around with that. Um, and then after about 2 months, I thought, I think I'm going to go study this. So I decided to go to the College of Naturopathic Medicine in Birmingham. I signed up for a course, which was like 12 grand, money I definitely didn't have at the time, but I just thought, I'm just going to figure this out. It's going to happen. And I went there, and during this process, they put me on azathioprine, which is an immunosuppressor for Crohn's disease, and steroids. So this stuff wasn't really working.
Of course not.
I'd had a couple of kind of relapses, and they were talking about surgery. And I just decided to do a mega dose of curcumin because Rhonda had talked about this study in Italy where this curcumin could had got rheumatoid arthritis patients walking again. People that couldn't
Mm.
walk after 6 weeks, they took 3 grams, which is a big dose of curcumin every day, and they were walking. I was like, I'm going to try it. So I did it, and my inflammation levels dropped like the HSCRP, everything kind of just like disappeared. And this was before any light or anything, or any of the circadian stuff. And the doctor was like, was kind of shocked that that happened, but was still recommending me surgery. And I was like, I just didn't like the
Like
idea
they
of
didn't,
having this.
it's like they don't even hear you. Like, here, I just
uh,
used this. This brought down my inflammation numbers, right? Like it's like they're like, oh no, but we'll still do the surgery.
Yeah, the results were artifact for them. It's
Yeah.
like, this is just, you're just, it's not really doing anything. And I got really irritated with that.
Yeah.
And I also got lucky because in the nutrition class, I met another rebel. His name's Elliot Overton. He's got quite a big following on YouTube. So me
Yeah, I
and him
like
were actually
Elliot.
classmates.
He's the oxalate guy. He always talks about oxalates.
Yes,
That's how
oxalates
I
and
think of him.
thiamine.
I know I learned about oxalates from him.
Yeah, he's huge on vitamin B1 as well. I think he
Yes,
sells like
thiamine. Yes.
thiamine.
Yep, you need a lot of
So
thiamine. Hmm.
So he was the only kid in the class kind of not vegan. Everyone else was vegan. And they were telling me that I should be vegan. But I knew vegan didn't work because actually in the run up to getting put into hospital, I'd done a raw vegan diet for 2 weeks because my girlfriend at the time had convinced me to do it. So I actually got into hospital because I'd eaten a roasted red pepper with quinoa in it. And it had expanded in my gut and caused such abdominal pressure that I had to go to hospital. And the funny thing is, my best friend was with me that night before he left, before I had the episode of pain. He was with me, and we were watching a movie, Edward Norton, like 48 Hours, I think it's called. Great movie. Anyway, he brought a steak over and was like, "You sure you just don't want a steak?" And I was like, "No, no, no. Like, I'm gonna do this roasted red pepper with the quinoa." And he was looking at me like, "Bro, come on, just have a steak." And he had a beer and a steak. He was like, "Bro, just have a steak. Like, you don't need this." And I was like, "No, no, no." And look, I ended up in hospital. So he knew he had the answer right there. Just have a steak.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, anyway, Elliot was eating this like keto fat bomb thing made of like egg yolk and vanilla and stuff. And everyone was like, "Oh, he's weird." Um, But I was like, this kid knows something. Like, why are you doing that? So we sat next to each other, and he brought me in Dr. Jack Cruise's blog on because I was doing the ice baths because I've been into Wim Hof from the Joe Rogan podcast. So um, he he brought me in the CT series. He was like, "You ever read this?" And I said, "Oh." He's like, "You've never heard of Jack Cruise?" I was like, "No." He was like, "Oh, bro, like you got to read this." So I started listening to the podcast with Jack, and I started doing the reading the CT blogs, and then like just the same as you guys, just the dominoes start falling, don't they? And you start sort of seeing what's going on. Um,
Mhm.
so within about 6 months, I'd kind of gone full ketogenic. Um, Continued with the ice baths. Started doing the EMF mitigation, the blue blocking. Um, And yeah, my inflammation continues to disappear. I gained a lot of muscle. I got really healthy. I started training in the gym again. Um, and yeah, from there, it was kind of like, it was all about this biohacking thing. I mean, it kind of took over my life in 2016. I was just like, this is amazing. But then I moved to London from Birmingham. And London is obviously like 10 times more of an EMF polluted
Yeah.
hellhole than Birmingham is. And so I'd gotten healthy and I just really wanted to just go to London and live there. So that desire took me there, but I actually ended up in a shared house and the mold was really bad there. And the EMF was obviously really bad, taking the tube and the trains every day around London. And over the course of about 6 to 9 months, my health deteriorated again. But the Crohn's disease, the IBD, never resurfaced. So that that aspect of it, kind of like those symptoms, the gut symptoms, were kind of permanently, or I guess until now, like really ameliorated and normalized. What happened though is I developed chronic fatigue and MCAS, so the mast cell
Um,
activation.
There's a big
And that was what,
correlation, which I'm sure you probably know, Sean, between EMFs, mold, and mast cell activation syndrome. There's a very, very big correlation between all of that. So that kind of makes sense to me. The EMFs drive it because it has to do with the calcium and the cellular, dehydration that we get. So it's driving the cell danger response and it's driving the mast cell activation syndrome. So not that that makes sense, but it does make sense because of the fact that you're in a higher non-native EMF environment. So I'm sure you could speak more on it, but.
yeah, that's kind of what I had to figure out because even though there's one thing reading Jack's blogs, and then there's another thing experiencing it. There's one thing reading the data, the theory of all this stuff, and there's another thing experiencing it. And again, by the grace of God, I was given the opportunity to experience that long, horrible bout of MCAS and chronic fatigue for like 2 years.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like, why would you want that? It's like, well, it actually gave me so much more than what the Crohn's did because it really made me dive deep into Jack's work. I went from being like sort of like a surface level reader um, with quite a big sense of arrogance about what I knew and a level of authority coming through me on like what people should be doing and what works and what doesn't, to just getting crushed and knowing I don't know anything actually. Um, and that was the greatest thing that ever happened.
Hmm.
So that took me sort of 2 years to really. I got really more into Jack's work then because I could feel what was happening and what he was writing, like with the EMFs, with the circadian rhythm. I was implementing stuff. I did the leptin reset properly. I kind of saw a shift, um, and yeah, I got a much deeper understanding of what was going on with the body. So yeah, that probably took me up until about 2019. I eventually met Jack in Poland um, at the Polish Health Summit, and we just hit it off straight away. Um, and then I went back out to see him and stayed with him for a while in Destin, and he was going through some huge changes in his life. And yeah, I decided to just move to Mexico. Like that was the game plan because I saw from a few holidays to India and a few holidays to Mexico that the sun was getting rid of 90% of the MCAS, 90% of the symptoms were disappearing when I was sunbathing in like UV
Yeah.
11 plus.
I mean, Heather and I hear that so often that the histamine symptoms just kind of disappear when you're out in the UV, and that's just because that histamine is being degraded in the sunlight, in the UV sunlight. So it's really supportive for people with mast cell. Now, so you moving, did that ameliorate those mast cell symptoms completely?
No. So, I mean, it took away a huge amount,
Hmm.
but the journey wasn't quite done yet in figuring out what was
Yep.
going on. Um, I really became a complete embodiment of of Jack's work. I mean, I moved to the Yucatan, sunbathing like a lunatic, like a heretic. Like um, my nose, my face, just complete like so much sun all day. Like 8 hours in UV 14, 15. I didn't care. There was nothing stopping me. Ice baths. Um, yeah, but I also did the Epcot protocol that he has on his website, the
I don't know
Epcot
that one.
X. I don't know
What's
if you've
that?
looked at that.
What
Yeah, so it's
No.
MCAT?
on the it's it's buried in the Gold Club back from 2012
Oh,
or
so it's not
something.
available to people who aren't in the Gold Club, right?
Yeah, I don't know
No,
it.
and
I don't know it.
What is it?
those
Give us the overview.
so E is epipaleo.
Oh. Hmm.
So it's a protocol specifically to rebuild the gut flora. So
Okay.
epipaleo is the E.
Hmm.
P is progesterone because you
Oh.
have to optimize your progesterone and estradiol,
Yep.
Hmm.
E2 ratio
Hmm.
um, is critical to heal the gut. Interesting one. It's a bit of a rabbit hole. What is it? EPC is cortisol. So you got to get your cortisol and salivary melatonin
Patterns.
um, study done, so you can see, you can see your cortisol um, levels, which mine were just elevated. I mean, it followed the curve, but it was just like 50% higher than everyone else than the normal range. Just stressed, which is what London does to you. So that was C, and then I think O is onions, garlic, and spices,
You need the
which
sulfur.
which he said in the webinar is like it's counterintuitive, because back then when he was teaching people the paleo thing in 2012, a lot of people were cutting out onions because it was like FODMAPs. It was given
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
can kind of make the gut go a bit crazy and cause problems. Um, Yeah, and then epcot, yeah. O onions, T is turmeric and curcumin. So I'd already knew I'd use that for good
Hmm.
effect for the IBD. Obviously, I'd already kind of used it to get off medication, and resveratrol. And then I think the X was some more spices and other things. Um, so yeah, I tried that. I tried a lot of stuff. I really biohacked between 2020 when I got here all through COVID. I was kind of alone. I moved to the jungle as well, and lived in kind of like no EMF, like just a literal jungle. Scorpions were falling from my palapa roof and tarantulas were everywhere. I mean,
A
you
little bit of a different, you have
can't.
different kinds of stressors. You have actual literal
Yes.
tigers or scorpions coming your way instead of
Yeah.
non-native
I
EMFs.
picked up I picked up like this what's it called? Like a poof, like the beanbag things that you get. Like I picked one of those up in my living room and a snake came out of it, like from underneath it and went under the
No.
fridge.
Ooh.
So yeah, I really did the thing. I mean, even Jack himself came out to that palapa because I was like, maybe this could be like the farm for Mexico, Jack. And he came out and he was like, this ain't it, dude. Not enough beach resort and cocktails for Jack's liking, I don't think. Um, so yeah, I did a lot of that, and I kind of went through like a bit of a dark night of the soul, really, during that period. I moved back to Tulum, and that's when I got really hooked into Vedic astrology and and yoga, and kind of went down that path.
Mm.
So I mean, that's a whole different other rabbit hole, but I'll let you guys kind of ask
How do
some
you
questions.
like where you're at now? You're in Tulum, right? And do you you must have bought your own place because otherwise there's no way because there's Wi-Fi is everywhere in Mexico. I've been in different places in Mexico, not Tulum yet, but it's kind of like here, how do you even get away from it? So how do you manage your non-native EMFs down there?
Well, this is sort of an interesting thing that I've kind of, because I obviously went to the one extreme, which was kind of cut it all out, and but I kind of lost a lot of other stuff. Like for every gain you make in your health, there is sort of an enormous sacrifice that comes with it.
Mhm.
And for me, it was about finding kind of like the middle and being able to sort of navigate this world, which is just it's more and more every day. I mean, every day we wake up, there's more EMF. There's another phone. There's another signal. There's something more coming.
We can't get away from
So
it.
no, you can the goal really, because a lot of people say this to me, like, oh, what am I supposed to do? They kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like,
Right.
oh, well, if it's everywhere, we're all screwed. And it's like, no.
Hmm.
The mind always wants to go to those extremes, like it's either black or white. And it's like, no,
Yeah,
it's actually more nuanced than that. And
always.
so you can mitigate your exposure massively. One of the things that helped me the most was learning how to mitigate dirty electricity.
Hmm.
That made a huge impact on my uh, the kind of last 10-15% of the MCAS that was kind of still lurking around, the dirty electricity really had a big impact on that. So one of the companies that I really like is Satic. I think you can use the Stetzer ones too, the dirty electricity filters, and just turning off like most of the grids on your circuit board. Like you can just turn them all off. Like you only really need like one, which is the kitchen, and the rest of them can just be off. Appreciate that if you've got kids and family, it's more difficult.
Yeah.
But I don't. I live alone. I rent, so I just do what I want. Um, and yeah, so I keep everything off.
So do you just turn off your
Grounding,
Wi-Fi at night?
One day I'll be turning off the whole circuits, but not now.
yeah, if only, yeah. Um, so yeah, the Wi-Fi I kind of have in the apartment here. I have it's actually next to me. It's always off. And when I what I do is I have the passwords to all the other Wi-Fi's because my friend owns the building, and so I just hack into their Wi-Fi when I need it. Um, but the most I think the ideal situation would be to get my own place, wire the Ethernet into the laptop, and then ground the router and ground the laptop into two earths. That I found was the best I ever felt. I was able to do that in Akumal where I used to live.
Mm,
Um, but it's really hard to kind of do that here. But
mm,
yeah, mostly I just have it off and try to just flick it on when I need it. But I'm always in airplane mode, and then I'll just flick on the Wi-Fi itself when I need to use it. Um, but I've definitely found that if you want to travel, if you want to be around other people,
Yeah.
if you want to meet new people, you want to enjoy your life,
yeah.
I think there's a real art of living in this world with the
Hmm.
knowledge of what we know about the EMF. And I've found that so I was talking to Nathan Siles the other day. You guys know him,
Uh,
right?
I don't know
Oils?
him. No. I know
Nathan
Nathan
Siles.
Walls, but not, no, I don't know him.
So Nathan's a special guy. I mean, I only met him myself for the first time 3 months ago, but I was staying at his place the other day. He's kind of sometimes spent some time up here in the Riviera Maya. Um, and we were talking about this. Um, he's a two times cancer survivor, and he
Mm,
was a very good friend of Jack's and also Jason Bowden Smith. Do you guys know him either? No?
mm-mm, mm-mm.
He was, again, you would hear him on webinars and stuff on Jack's site from 2018 because he had the deuterium depleted water that he made, I think, in Australia, and he had the first, I think he had Mito HQ, which was the first red light panels
Mm.
um, that were in 2018. He was a huge member of the community. He actually passed away just, I
Oh,
think, two
that's
years ago. He
awesome.
passed away of cancer. He'd had cancer himself, I think, twice, and I think the third time it came back and took him out.
Mm,
Um, yeah, he was a legend, Jason. Nathan is Australian too, so
mm,
um, but yeah, we were talking about this topic the other day, and I was sort of explaining to him that the equation of Jack's blogs is E equals MC squared. This is the equation. Life moves with this equation, through this equation. It is this equation, really. It's really genius. If you can't control the C squared, which is the light, and that is EMF as well, you
mhm.
can control the mass. And that's what we're seeing at the moment in the health space is a lot of people ignoring the C squared,
Oh
completely
yeah.
ignoring the C squared, and they're only focused on the mass. But
Mhm.
it is interesting how far they get with just focusing on the mass, right? Like it's quite astounding how far they do get without knowing anything about light, nothing about quantum biology.
Well,
So
not me, not my story. Functional medicine took me nowhere. I couldn't make any traction. And now learning with what we're learning, starting with Justine, Heather, I mean, I was just stuck in CDR1. So basically that meant my body would not, any supplement somebody threw at me just made me worse. It was nothing. So I got nowhere with functional medicine.
Well,
Yeah.
there's probably a spiritual, mental, emotional component to how far they get as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I would say so. Sure.
well, there's that, but there's also just that the functional medicine people don't even understand their own field. So, if you went and I went and saw functional, they don't even understand their own data. This is the thing because they haven't experienced it. We have. We've
Hmm.
experienced when the functional medicine doesn't work,
Yep.
but I've also come all the way back around and experienced where it does work. But I had to leave nutrition and naturopathy and functional medicine and
Mm.
become completely disillusioned with it, go all the way into Jack's work, and then come all the way back and bring that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's really what the
That
body
makes,
clock is. It's
yeah.
bringing them both together.
I like that.
And the body clock really is bringing circadian biology and quantum biology and merging it with functional medicine, which shouldn't be what it is. Functional medicine as a thing separate from its own industry is a beautiful thing. It's really just an intelligent form of advanced nutrition combining all holistic, esoteric, ancient wisdom with data, with scientific data, and also paying attention to what people are experiencing. It should be open to including more information so that functional medicine can serve better. That's the point of it. What it
Yes,
actually is at the moment is just an industry selling supplements. But that's
exactly.
So
right. So the practitioners are kind of they're only capable of helping you. They're limited by their own capacity to help you,
Of
right?
course. Just like like a regular doctor that they don't know. They don't know it. They don't know the other information, you know?
No. So they could have the right tools there that could help you, but they don't even know what they're looking for or how to use it.
Correct.
Um,
So the body clock,
so
your approach, Sean, is sounds like what I'm getting so far is a synthesis between the bioenergetic, the electric, right? The electromagnetic, it's like knowing that we are basically energy, and then you're weaving back in from the functional world so that, or whatever's like appropriate for that person, right? You can tailor
yes,
it. But my thinking is also the way you're looking at it is now that you are addressing the energetic aspects of the body, these things are going to work differently and or better. I don't know. I'm just
yes,
thinking out loud.
1,000,000%.
yeah. Yeah, like how does a supplement like how does curcumin work? Like would it work in me now? Or let's say, I don't know, let's say I hadn't gone anywhere near Jack's work, right? And I just kind of stayed in nutrition. That curcumin supplement that I took in 2015, it was brilliant, right? That 3 grams, it did the trick, got my inflammation down. But if I'd have just carried on and gone away and then stayed in Birmingham and whatnot, and then 5 years, 6 years later, I had another flare up and tried it again, would it work? We don't know. We
Right.
have no idea. It could have not done anything. But so does heteroplasmy in mitochondria, does the aging component, does the
Mm-hmm.
availability of the electrons affect how well these things work? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I find that really interesting too. And I find with deuterium depleted water, have you read the Gabor Sommelier book that Defeating Cancer? You
No, but
guys,
I've heard about it, but I
so
have not read that one, but I've heard about it.
Mhm.
it's a relatively short book. It's a good one to read because 80% of it is just trials. It's just
Hmm.
trials being described to you. And so it's very quantitative, all of it. It's just we gave this ppm to this dog or mouse or rabbit or even humans. They did a lot of different stuff. And this was prostate cancer. This was, you know, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. This was pancreatic cancer. And they just observed Gabor did and his team, like what happened, And
Mhm.
what they found was that the cancer cells, if you went in with 25 ppm, you could get rid of, let's say, the pancreatic cancer or halt it. But then a year later, if it came back and you went to use the 25 ppm again, it wouldn't work. So they figured out that you have to
Lower it.
descend slowly. You have to start with
Mhm.
85, or else you've already used your kind of your ace card too quick.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think little nuances like this are kind of really important in healing, and with the body. These little kind of little crumbs, like it just fascinates me. Like, why would the deuterium depleted wort not just work every time? You know?
Yeah.
Um, so definitely, yeah, I think there's like what you were saying, Vanessa, about, functional medicine did nothing for me. I think most people have had that experience and they just feel robbed at 100%. Um,
Yeah. Well, when you're going with chronic insomnia and pain, and it's like, well, take the tryptophan, take the melatonin, you know what I mean? Like nobody told me about my light environment, and I felt a little bit like after I learned that, I was like, why do they not know this? Like that's what I felt like. Every functional medicine doctor, every naturopath should be trained in this information. That's how I felt because I wasted a year where I could have been sleeping and healing and repairing if I just would have went outside and stood in the grass at sunrise and put my blue blockers on. But nobody told me to do that. They told me to take melatonin, you know? So
yes. Yeah.
I felt like a little bit angry. That was the feeling I felt, like I lost a year because you guys were incompetent, which is not their fault because
Right.
they didn't know any better. But that's like, I'm like, why are we not teaching this? This is what the mission is to get it more well known now, you know?
Yes. And that's kind of where I'm at too, is that I'm not going to pretend that I know how to heal every single person. I'm not going to
No.
pretend that I know if even functional medicine is appropriate for each person. But it's a tool,
Hmm.
and it depends on what the goals are for the individual. So if that's really what medicine is for, isn't it? It's to kind of give you more liberty over your life, because you're effectively in like a thermodynamic corner where you're stuck and you can't go to work, or you can't eat anything, you can't have a family anymore. Everything gets
Yeah.
stopped, really. And so it would be naive of me to suggest that everybody needs to just move to Mexico and that's the solution, because there are a million reasons why someone wouldn't. And it took me a long time to kind of to understand that
Hmm.
what my experience was and what my knowledge was isn't necessarily going to be for everyone else. And there was a lot of outward frustration that I had at the world. Why don't they get it? Um,
But if everybody moved there, then it would be overpopulated too. Like you have to think about it that way. Like not
I
everybody
don't
can
want
live
them
in.
here. Like, stay out. This is my beach. No, yeah. So there's that. There's also just what people want. That comes into the sort of comes into questioning here. Like, what is it that we want? What is it? What is our purpose? What are we here for? Um,
Yeah, exactly. Because this becomes the spiritual and the consciousness. So if you have the health, if you have abundance internal, if you have lots of negative electrons, then what are you going to do with that? Are you going to do more of the same, or does this open up new avenues for you?
well, this is the bit that I've been with for like 2 years, and I went back to India, not
Mhm.
necessarily not necessarily just to kind of ask this question, like India just knows, but there is a lot of um, there is a gold mine there of men that have lived and men that live now, and women and saints, humans in general that have lived in that place and come through that place that have got to that point where they've started to question, what is this reality? What is it for? Is it all just about me and what I want? And you know, why do we suffer? Why do we get sick? And that really helped me. that
Mm.
journey back there to really kind of understand. But there isn't really an answer. It's not like science, and it made me drop my scientific mind. The process of exploring all of that stuff made me give up a lot of my scientific mind because it didn't work. Because there is no concrete fact, there is no piece of data or study that will tell you, what it is. Life is a mystery, and it's supposed to be lived. There's no answer to it. There's no answer for this reality. It's to be lived every day. That is the point. And
And the life you're living is the medicine.
yeah, I think, yeah, I think like disease in general, I think is an invitation for us to understand reality
Oh
deeper.
yeah. Hmm.
I think that's the point of it. Um, and suffering in general is that it's an opportunity. It's an invitation. Um, because yeah, I was quite disillusioned for a while there during COVID with kind of what I was seeing in, especially in our health space. Is if you get all these electrons and you get it all back, is the goal just to go back on Instagram and share all this stuff?
That's so
Like
funny.
it was, it was like really kind of like
Hmm.
paralyzing for me because it made no sense. Like there was a story in my mind about doing it. Like you have to do this, like you have to share your knowledge. But what I encountered was that people didn't want to know it at
Yeah.
all. In fact, far less than anything. I mean, you guys both know that, right? Like
Oh,
what we're
definitely.
trying to say, nobody wants to know about it. Like the last thing they want to hear about is what we're talking about on this podcast. Um,
So true.
so I was like, damn, you know, and yeah, just I actually kind of understood why people didn't want to do it as well. Like it wasn't just like, oh, they don't want to listen to me. Like it was more like, actually, yeah, why would you kind of go live in the jungle on your own? Like, like why? Heather's laughing her head off at the but
That's
it's true. I
funny.
kind of couldn't like, what's the word? Is it ratify? Is it like I couldn't kind of justify it? I was like, what do I do? Do I just sit in the jungle with a perfect balance of EMF and just do nothing?
Right. There's
Um,
a balance here, right? We don't have to go to those such extremes, right? It's like living in a balance, because then you're cut off from connection in society and
Yeah.
everything else and everything that the support systems that we have, right?
yes.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's it. But that balance is going to look so remarkably different for all different types of
Oh,
people.
a million percent.
And us as Westerners, we have kind of so much options, right? We have like so much money and so much kind of like we can just go traveling and our visas just get in everywhere. But like, what about for like billions of Indians that are just in Delhi, just subjugated to just smog and EMF? What about the people in Caracas? What about the people in, the favelas in Sao Paulo? What about the people in Birmingham? What are they going to do? What is are we trying to sort of save everyone? And I asked this question to Jack, and it kind of got me banned off the forum. That's actually what happened. I got banned.
For
Um,
asking that question? Huh.
kind of, not specifically just that, but where I was trying to go kind of wasn't allowed because what I was suggesting was that I don't know if we're doing service to everyone with
Right.
how we're carrying this message.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
that was not really allowed, not on his site
Mm.
anyway.
Hmm.
Um,
Wow.
so that kind of, yeah, and also a lot of the stuff he was saying, obviously, about the circle of six and kind of the relationship stuff. I met him in that moment in time, right? So we met right at that moment when he was writing all that stuff. But I just didn't see congruence in real life with kind of what he was writing. and what was actually being done. In fact, I felt like
Mm.
it was more like where I'd just come from, which was a very toxic family scenario that I didn't want to be a part of. So
Mm.
it kind of again confused me. Like, what am I doing? What am I saying? Is this the way to deliver it? Are we helping? Are we for humanity, or is this for ourselves? It's fine if it is for ourselves, but which one is it? Let's just be honest about it,
Mm.
right? So yeah, there was just a lot of questions. Some of them have been resolved, but not all of them. A lot of them still remain a mystery, and that's kind of where I am.
Where are the
Mm.
current questions that you're sitting with nowadays?
I think
Mm.
just reality in general right now is I'm becoming more and more at ease with what it is.
Yeah.
And it really is uncertainty. Like we talk about it a lot, don't we? Like entropy and chaos, but it
Mhm.
really is uncertainty. And the more you meditate, the more. So I like to use techniques that I learned from Osho, from Bhagwan Rajneesh, the crazy guy who set up the cult in, the documentary and whatnot. Somehow I ended up learning from him. And I actually think he's the greatest master that we've ever had. He was so funny, and he makes jokes of the whole of spirituality, which I gravitate towards because I love that. I think everything should be open to be mocked and questioned and made fun of, right? I just don't think seriousness has any place here. But we
Mm.
are really in a serious society. I mean, everything is so damn serious. Um, but you can see why it's serious because things are really, really insane. I mean, they're more insane than when you guys grew up. It was insane, but not as insane as it is now. I'm sure you can agree, right?
Mhm. Yeah, it was pretty insane though, still then.
Yeah, when you look at it overall, it's insane. Um, but yeah, the last few years have been like
Yes.
almost on steroids, how insane things are. So yeah, I think the question right now has been kind of how do I live spontaneously? How do I live
Mm.
surrendered to a kind of
Mm.
universal will,
Hmm.
God, the universe? But what do I do? That like right this morning I was speaking with my friend Nina. She lives in Serbia, and she was like, "Yeah, but we can meditate, Sean, but we can't just like sit around and do nothing. Like we have to go get a job." Right? And, and she's right, but she was missing the point of kind of what I was trying to say, which was that if we can become more and more silent, more and more relaxed, and it really does take a long time, the more relaxed you can become, the more still you can become,
Yeah.
the more your energy moves from your mind, which is really causing all these problems out in the world at the moment, is the collective mind and the individual mind needing, grasping, desperately taking, and planning and thinking and never really just existing in its own. Just we're not we aren't being. We're thinking constantly,
Yep.
analyzing,
Mm.
planning, worrying,
Human
and
doings instead of human beings. That's what we are. We're human doers all the
human
time. We're
doing.
always
Yeah,
doing, always thinking. It never stops instead of just being.
and it's the hardest thing I found. It was more difficult than reading Jack's Ubiquitination series. I mean, that was pretty difficult, but much more difficult is being. There is no greater challenge than that every day to just be.
Agreed.
So that's kind of where I'm at right now. How do I just be? How do I take everything I've learned? How do I get all this experience? And then how do I just be? And how do I do that? And so that's where I am right now.
Mm.
Well, the conundrum is, right? So to be able to be in the moment, right? Be fully embodied, fully embracing the moment, But then how do you plan for what you want to do in the future? It's like, can I go there?
Yeah,
If
because
I
you
want
can't
to
know. Yeah,
experience.
because then it's just kind of like you're like letting it unfold the way it should be without really having a plan. And that is scary. It's scary. It's a scary, like I have fear around that. I'm like, wait, I have to have a plan. I have to know where I'm going. I have to figure it out, right? But like that is like the trust and the surrender to what is. If you cannot be the planning and you could just be in the being and just trust that things are going to work out and unfold, maybe you meditate and you manifest. Maybe that you do. You manifest for what you want. That's my thinking, but you don't really have to plan. You just have to allow it to happen. I don't know.
Yes, but yeah, and in the moment, it's immensely difficult. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
and the other thing is we can all imitate that to a certain degree when things are smooth.
Right.
But what I noticed was that when pressure arrived, I wasn't so much of a Buddha as I thought I was. And and so yeah, it's I think time over time we transform constantly and we can become more and more relaxed. And I think what's really happening um, is there is not only kind of like a circadian biology happening to man, where like the cycles, of the sun every day, the light and dark cycles. I think we're just sort of understanding and getting into how that's affecting us and how important that is. I think once you kind of lock into that, then I mentioned it earlier about Vedic astrology, but I'm starting to really become more attuned to how the planet
Oh,
movements.
hugely affect us. Big time. Oh yeah.
Yes,
Well, Pluto is gonna has what 20 years going on right now. What's going on? So yeah, that all really affects us big time. I want to study astrology so much. I find it so interesting. And just like
it's
learning my
fascinating.
chart and learning about what like it so resonates, like every like it so resonates. Not just, your sun. I'm a sun Scorpio, but I'm also a moon Aquarius and I have a house in Pluto and like all these things. It's just like you dive deep into it, it is so exciting. Like it really is so
Yeah,
interesting to me.
it's
Sorry.
immense. Have you? No, it's good. Have you done any? Have you looked into Vedic, into Indian astrology?
No, no idea, but now you have me intrigued. Of course, I'm going to want to know more.
Yes. Well, just so happens. Um, yeah. So that is what I got because I've always liked astrology, but and so I kind of knew my chart before the Western chart. But what happened when I came out of the
Different.
jungle with the scorpion and all that stuff, as I came back, he did my Vedic astrology chart, and he just absolutely like nailed me with it, and uh, much more deeper than just general kind of characteristics. You're fiery and blah to finding, you know, what the Indians would call Shakti, or like a sort of be that experience of the divine, that sort of ecstatic joy for life. You're actually hunting for it in other people. And he's like,
Mm,
this is very common, but what you need to do is start looking for God, start looking for divinity, start shifting your attention just 10, 20% instead of being so focused on finding the right woman or finding the right person to fill that.
mm.
Go and try something else. So he said a lot more stuff, but I was like, whoa. So what did I do? I spent the next 6 months in two really toxic relationships. And then, and so I completely ignored him. And then I called him up at the end of the year and was like, what's this Vedic astrology thing you were telling me about? Like, what do I do? Because I can't do this anymore. This is insane. So that's when I started practicing Kriya yoga, which to on your breath and then concentrate. Eventually, the further you go with the breath observation, of draw your attention with your eyes, you kind of look upwards at your third eye here, and then you begin to sort of imagine at first, but eventually it becomes perception of energy moving up your spine. And that
Mm.
subtle movement of energy is like very blissful. It's very
Mm.
ecstatic. It's kind of like you're making love with God. And
Mm.
that experience, as that started to happen more and more, as well as I had some quite sort of, maybe there were hallucinations, but what I kind of deemed sort of divine visits from Divine
Mhm.
Mother, or when I was on a motorbike once, um, things started to happen.
Mm.
And yeah, I found that if we all had an understanding of how to access
Yeah.
this
Mm.
inner sensation, this inner connection, there wouldn't be so much mental clambering for external things, for things on the outside to be fixed. But
Mm.
it does require slowing down massively. And effectively, it's there within all of us. We all have this within us. We're all divinely connected, blissfully, ecstatically connected to
Mhm.
God. But we do everything possible to avoid it effectively in how we're living. And I think, in terms of a root cause of sickness or a root cause of what's going on in society, I think that might be it. Maybe it'll change in a couple of
Mm.
years, but I think
Mhm.
the lack of that, of vitamin God, vitamin G, that's the problem.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I agree. The
Yeah.
reverence for, I mean, we lack ritual, we lack reverence, we lack
Mhm.
the inspiration, the mystery, the awe, the wonder, just being able to be out and connecting with nature to start off. That's why I
Right.
think the circadian is such a great bridge for people to
Mhm.
get from their, the just running in that hamster wheel, got to go to
Right.
work, da, 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 da. And, they don't really think about anything outside of that to, oh, wait a minute,
They
what
don't even have time to think about
possible?
that.
Yeah,
They
no
don't even
time.
there was no they're literally hustling. I mean,
Yeah.
I lived it. I know exactly what that's like. I never even had a second to even have a exception to even like consider anything else. Like I was just like so busy all the time that it was just like there was no time and space for that. And that is a big, huge problem in this society for amazingly.
It is. And I think that's kind of where I want to move to eventually, is to try and teach people, or at least guide them to masters, because the masters have written and spoken so much, and they've given us so much techniques. And I like to call them sort of like pocket techniques. So just ones that you can keep in your pocket wherever you are. Um,
That's nice.
because I think both health and divinity, if you want to talk about sort of decentralized medicine and or whatever, I think we need the common man and the common woman to
Hmm.
be able to have access to
Yes.
divinity and to health. I think it's like that's a right that we should all have,
So what are
right? We
these? What's a
should be
like,
able
little
to.
pocket technique? You want to share one with us? What is a pocket technique?
Yeah, it's like, oh, what's that? What's that?
Yeah, I'm curious.
So,
I like it. You put it in your pocket, you take the technique out whenever you need it. I like that.
yes. So obviously some of them you can't do while you're driving, but some of them you can. Um, but obviously a really simple one is just to watch the breath going in and out of your nose as you're breathing, right? So just the observation of the breath slowly going up your nose and then out, slowly in, how it feels on the inside
Mm.
draws your attention,
Hmm.
right, to this place. It's not
Hmm.
really about where you put the attention, because you could put it anywhere. You can put it on your big toe if you want. It's going to do the same thing. It's kind of like a self-hypnosis, most of these
Mm.
techniques.
Mm.
And that's not really meditation. That's kind of concentration,
Hmm.
but it's a necessary step to still the the monkey mind, the active mind, which is planning and analyzing and worrying about next week and how you're going to make money for this and that. It's a necessary step to take to kind of concentrate your attention there. And the longer you can stay there on that particular point that you're focusing on,
Mm.
the better, because the more your body relaxes. So really, before we even think about meditation or anything, because meditation is really when you're so quiet and relaxed, you just witness the space that is your mind. You just sit, observe, and witness it. But that's almost impossible when you've got so much noise happening.
Yes.
And most of the thoughts, this is what I've discovered anyway, most of our thoughts are actually just acoustics being translated from cellular noise. So that's why if you eat, let's say you eat onions, right? Like a really high sulfurous food, that has an impact on your gut, on your cells. It delivers a strong charge, which for bad or for worse, depending on the redox state of that tissue in the epithelium, right? It can be good or it can be bad. It can kind of open up the gate to heaven or hell. That's what hydrogen sulfide really is. It's kind of like, angels and demons in kind of one molecule. So that's going to have an effect. So something that I learned first was that I had to understand my SNPs. So I have a CBS, what they call a cystathionine beta synthase deficiency. That's one of my SNPs that I've got, which is a single nucleotide polymorphism, right? So that means that when I intake sulfur, like onions, I overproduce sulfites and ammonia,
Mhm.
which goes on to sort of cause me to have an excess of ammonia in the body, which is a toxin. So I guess the first technique is kind of really the is really what we're doing here, which is quantum biology, and because you've got to understand the body, right, before you can move into sort of techniques and relaxation and meditation. I mean, that's there, but if the body is stressed, you kind of have no hope. That's why in Ayurveda and in India, they always focused on sort of fasting and purifying the body. Now, they used a vegetarian diet because it's low in sulfur. So they actually recognized that the
Mm.
meat was too stimulating, it delivered too much of a charge. And what you're actually doing in meditation and in yoga is actually trying to leave the body, not encourage its sort of activity or dominance. Now,
Mm.
unfortunately, that's been translated in modern society to we should all be vegan. Well, Buddha was never vegan. None of the Indians are even vegan themselves. They aren't even dogmatic about their vegetarianism. If you go there, they eat a little bit of tuna throughout the week because they recognize the power that's within the tuna because it's got sulfur in it, it's got methionine and cysteine in it. They also
Mm.
recognize the power of the sources. So they don't actually have too much curry or spice because it's too powerful. It takes them away from their meditative state. It takes them away from their union with God. So I lived in Kerala in India with a lady. She was kind of like she owned the house and I was staying there for 3 months and she would make me all my food. Now I went there and was like making eggs and this was before I figured out my SNPs don't like eggs, but I was doing the eggs and the meat and she would come in and she'd be like, do you want me to make you breakfast? And I was like, no, 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 I have to do this keto like thing. Like you don't understand, you don't get it. She's just this Indian lady. She doesn't understand anything about Jack or what's going on with the light. But actually, I don't know why, but I decided to just let her make breakfast for me for a while. And there was some immense wisdom to it. It was mostly rice, which would be it's a C3 plant, so it's actually lower in deuterium relatively than other foods like bread or whatever. And she told me that they only put a little bit of the curry, tiny bit of the tuna, and I was like, "But aren't you vegetarian?" She's like, "What?" She didn't even understand what being a vegetarian was because that would be ridiculous. No, you just you just eat appropriately for the day, right? That's what we do. We're not mostly non-veg because we're doing mantras all day and meditations and rituals, and we want to be calm and still, and we don't want the tuna and the spice to affect that. And I was like, so you're not just all vegetarian? That's not like a dogmatic thing. And it's like, no, it's ridiculous. So it's only in the West that we have this thing of I am a vegetarian, right? Because it's identity. It's like I am a
You have to
carnivore.
claim a
I
diet.
am,
Yeah, always.
yeah.
So much rigidity and dogma in diet. It's like, oh my goodness, I cannot. You do not have to be that.
No, you really don't. It's just all tools. It's just about having more and more awareness of what it is that you need. And I think what the Ayurvedic system had, which was to understand if you have like if your dosha, which is if you're pitta,
Hmm.
if you're more kapha, I think that is their translation without science, without any data. It's their understanding of different SNP profiles, different phenotypes.
Ah, I love that.
So I
Yeah, that
think
makes sense.
pitta, which is I'm pitta, because if you give me a bit of meat, I'm like, I'm like all assertive and I only need a little bit because I have the CBS, which means that I use all the sulfur. Like if you I use too much sulfur, I only need a tiny, tiny bit. So that
Mm.
makes sense with a pitta profile, which is what the yogis recommend, less meat, more kind of more pescatarian, more kapha foods because you need to calm down a little bit. So I
Mhm.
figured out that for years in Birmingham, I was following Jack's Epcot Epipaleo thing with all the onions and eating like a kilo of fish every day or a kilo of meat. That was actually giving me huge bouts of MCAS, which the Ayurvedic would have told me because they always tell you that if you're pitta and you eat meat, you're going to get eczema, you're going to get histamine
I
symptoms.
relate very much to Pitta. That's very interesting. I have one book on Ayurvedic and I relate to that. So it's such interesting knowledge for me. Hmm.
Yeah, and you were saying earlier, right, about your experience of functional medicine and the kind of what you've experienced there with interstitial cystitis and things like that.
Mhm.
Probably your SNP profile and how you're responding to some of the foods that we're recommending in our space, our community right now. With
Mm.
Jack's work and with the carnivores, we're kind of all sort of sharing the same sort of wisdom that like meat
I
is the
can't
way,
be
load your
totally
tip.
carnivore. I don't do well with full carnivore. I already know that. I actually lost my cycle on full carnivore. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
me
don't.
too. I didn't
Yeah.
lose my cycle, but I don't do well with it.
I don't do well with full carnivore.
um,
It's not for me. Yeah.
but if you read the blogs of these people and
Mm.
you followed the data, which is what I did,
Mm.
think you're just like something's wrong with me because I'm doing what they're all saying. Like everyone's curing from carnivore, everyone's
Hmm.
just eating steaks all day, and like all their issues have gone. And then you go on Facebook. I mean, this is what the people listening to this podcast are probably going to be experiencing. Just I'm doing everything and I'm still ill, right? So I think that's kind of what I'm trying to open up a little bit. Is
Hmm.
just do we need to chill a little bit and just relook without hurting anyone's feelings or attacking this guy and his ideas and whatnot? It's like, how about we just open this back up for discussion again and just recognize the power of food, the power of light, and your own constitution, like
Yep.
your own makeup,
Hmm.
and give more attention, more meditativeness to how you're responding to it. Because that's what the yogis did. That's what Ayurveda is. It's giving awareness and reverence to food, giving reverence to fire, to the elements, and sulfur is fiery. It gives zest and power. And that might be really good for someone who's like kapha, right? They are double knockout MTHFR, but their CBS is negative, negative. They're good. So they actually need a ton more methionine to get that MTHFR cycle spinning through. So they're going to
Mm.
jump on carnivore and go, holy, thank God I am eating 3 steaks a day. All my issues have gone away. But they can't, of course, give that as a doctrine to everybody else because everybody has their own SNP profile. Everyone's different.
Right. I think it comes down to really we're all bio-individual, right? It really is bio-individuality. Like we can't really follow any kind of, especially when it comes to food and diet, like any kind of rigid dogma diet. And we have to really find what works for us. And that's what's most important. And that sometimes we need somebody to guide us along the way of that, right? Like to figure that out or we need to know this information or, that's really important.
So, Sean, how
Yeah.
do you, when you start working with someone, do you just do like an informal intake or do you have them go get SNP testing? I mean, how do you start to zero in on where you're going to take them?
Yeah. Do you base it on
Well,
symptoms
it
or on
depends.
SNPs?
I mean, ideally, all of it. But the thing is that they don't always want to do what you want to do. Like, it's like, I want to take you down this way, but a lot of time they don't believe it. So they have their idea of how they're going to heal, and I'm just going to facilitate that. But it's going to be this way because I know better, right? That's kind of what I get a lot of is kind of I'm willing to do this, but I'm not willing to do that. So that's the first thing I meet with, and I kind of just have to be patient with every single person. And um, I know where I want to take them and what I want to show them, but I got to recognize that it took me 5, 10 years to figure this stuff out. They're not going to be able to do it all overnight. So it also depends on their goals because, yeah, a lot of them aren't buying the EMF thing. They first of all don't even know what SNPs are. They don't even necessarily think they're real. They just think this guy is trying to make me do expensive testing and charge me a load of money, and it's probably a waste of time. And they've just spent 2 years being scammed by another functional medicine practitioner.
Yep.
So they're like guards up, like no, no,
Yep.
but they see some sense in what I'm saying. So that's kind of what I have to do is just kind of be patient and slowly kind of educate them and just drop the kind of nuggets and get them more and more curious. Um, Most of the time, I just get them started on like what I call like level one, two, and three of the diet stuff, which level one is kind of just like a base foundational paleo diet, just getting them to get rid of like bread and rubbish food and like just really starting super simple and a bit more sunlight and the airplane mode on your phone, just like these really, really basic things. Um, and then they start to come along. And then level two could be kind of ketosis, kind of more restriction, because the ketones are quite therapeutic. And then yeah, level three, perhaps intermittent fasting, stuff like that. So that's kind of like some people just want that. They just want the diet. They don't want to do anything else. If they're willing, then I'll get them in the sun, get them on the red lights, get them on the cold therapy. And some of them are really willing to do it. I've got a guy right now with lung cancer who's doing like OMAD, 1 meal a day, straight in, all grass-fed beef. Um, and he's doing amazing. His melanin has returned in his skin, even
Mm.
though he's in the Netherlands
Mm.
in December and January, his melanin has come back. Which how tremendous is that, knowing what we know about
Amazing.
melanin and
Amazing.
all the buzz about that, right? So it's like his redox status has shifted. He hasn't even had any more UV because he's in the Netherlands, but his melanin has returned, his melanation, his alpha MSH has come back just
Yep.
from the cold and the fasting, which is just
Mm.
wow, right? So ideally, though, yeah, I want the SNP panel, which I know people don't like 23andMe because they sell all your data and they're going to clone us, and there's going to be an army of clones um, running around after us. I actually wouldn't mind having a clone, to be honest. Like, one just to send out to get me stuff. So I'm like, I don't really care.
I like
Maybe he
that.
can figure out some of the problems that of me doing it all the time. So yeah, ideally the SNP profile. And then I like to have that. And I know a lot of people hate this test, but I like the organic acids test too because it gives me an idea of kind of how their metabolizing stuff. It gives me some Krebs cycle, info. Um, yeah, and I think that's kind of about it. And then yeah, just to kind of know what they're doing. But I think a lot of it is really simple. A lot of it is taking away stuff that they don't need and getting them
Hmm.
comfortable. Um, and yeah, the more we kind of can sort of focus on that E equals MC squared equation. So obviously the 1 meal a day is the mass, is the making the deuterium depleted water, it's the making more light hydrogen in your mitochondria. That's how you solve the M. And then you add in the C squared on top of that, which is basically trying to mitigate as much as possible in this person's life the EMF that they're around, which they might be in New York, they might be in Mexico, who knows, depends. And then yeah, getting that in, um, and then that's going to give you more energy. That's going to give the cell and the mitos more energy, and that's just going to be better for them. Wherever they want to take that, then it's up to them.
Mm. Yeah. Well, that sounds like a really great foundation that you're planting. And then it leaves that up to like you said, up to them if they want to go further. So I like that. It's perfect. Yeah. So we're getting close to the end here, Sean. This has been so fun. We've had a really good time chatting with you. We want to have you share where people can find you, parting words of wisdom, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at thebodyclock.co. I'm not really active there, but I check it like every few days. Um, or yeah, you can go to my website, thebodyclock.co. Um, and you can find me there. I've wrote some blogs there. Um, what else? Any parting words of wisdom? Yeah, just more awareness. That's
Mm.
all I want to encourage. Just more awareness. No dogmas, no do's and don'ts, just more awareness, more receptivity, and yeah, you can't lose.
Mm. Perfect. Love
Wonderful.
it.
Thank you so much for your time today, Sean. And I've just you have been a wealth of knowledge and but a lot of heart and
Mm.
then a lot of wisdom. So thank you so much. And hopefully we can come down and see you someday in Tulum. That would be
That
awesome.
sounds great. I'm ready to go now.
Yeah,
I've got snow.
yeah, yeah. Come to Tulum. I'll take you to the beach. Let's go.
That's fun.
Thank you.